we're going to talk a little bit about working with beliefs. And by beliefs, we're talking here about both what we've been referring to as core beliefs or schematic processing, as well as intermediate beliefs or meaning level processing of cognition. To look at just some of the basics here, and actually I mentioned this already, one of the things that we're talking about here is core beliefs. Core beliefs represent these kind of more stable, long-standing memory structures that contain both cognitive elements, but also kind of behavioral, emotional, and physiological kind of remnants that are tied to them. So once we activate a schema structure, a lot of those different areas of processing get activated along with them. So for our clients, they often feel as though they're happening all at the same time, or our clients may be focused on one level of that schematic processing or another. In my experience, oftentimes clients are more focused on the emotional component of that activation than they are the belief level. And so part of the therapeutic work is helping them to understand the belief level in the cognitive processing part of their schematic representations. At the conditional belief level, these are what I will refer to often as the meaning-making structures. These beliefs are things through which our experiences are processed. So, for example, if something happens to me, there may be, like, I may just not even process it. Like, something happens, whatever it is, what it is, it doesn't even get processed. There are other times where I have to consciously and actively kind of process and make sense of what's going on. Those are the things that often, well, and from a therapy standpoint, because we're dealing with people who have had difficulties processing these things, there are points at which people may have processed information. I hate to use the word incorrectly, but they may have processed the information idiosyncratically. So according to their own beliefs, the things they have available to them at the moment. I often say to my clients, well, that stuff happened to you when you were 7 years old or 12 years old or 14 years old or 6 years old, whatever age it is, a level at which you didn't have the ability to make sense of it as you might now as an adult. So often those meaning making structures that we use are very underdeveloped at the times that we use them, and they often sit with us in an underdeveloped state and in a very raw emotional state. Which brings us to the second point here, and that is when we're talking about belief structures, our belief structures at times may be conscious. We may be aware of the meaning we make, the ideas that we have, the beliefs we have about ourselves. Oftentimes, they're not all that conscious to us. Like if we had to consciously process every single thing in our world, it would take us a tremendous amount of time and we would never get anything done. So oftentimes this level of schematic processing and unconscious processing occurs when we don't even have the awareness of it occurring for us. So that's part of the therapeutic process, is bringing these things that may be kind of unconscious to us to a more conscious level of awareness, and potentially changing our awareness and understanding of them based on our new conscious thought and processing through of these things. So let's talk about, and I'm going to go through these relatively quickly. They're in your reading. Hopefully we'll spend some time talking about them in class as well. But how do we work with these belief structures? What do we do with them? And the one thing that I will, I guess, reinforce here is that anytime we're working with these belief structures, we're talking about what is the meaning, what I just realized that was typed twice. What is the meaning? That might be my unconscious way of saying that this is important. What's the meaning of the things that we're talking about? What's the meaning that we've attributed to certain situations, to certain events? And then this question of what could be the meaning. So how might we take the meaning that we've already subscribed to a certain event or a certain situation, and how could we change that to be more functional, different, more insightful than it was at the time that we originally processed it. So how do we make these changes? And there's two, I should have numbered these, like I think two kind of broad strategies, one being the more exploratory that you might see with the psychodynamic type of approach, where I'm going to kind of guide you through. I'm going to help you explore these things. I'm going to talk to you about it. Together we'll come to a new kind of understanding, a new potential experience for you in psychotherapy and in the relational terms. But these are non-directive kind of strategies. The second group, and you can, it almost like makes sense that there's like, oh, there's 6 of them that are more directive, because these kind of come more out of the cognitive or cognitive behavioral strategies. And I'm not going to go through each of these in depth, but from a behavioral change perspective, I might just kind of simply ask you to behave differently. I said this to a client recently where I said, I want you to pretend like you're confident. What would a confident person, in your opinion, do in this situation compared to what you do? And the idea here is that I'm going to act as if, I'm going to act differently. And what I'm going to do is going to pay attention to what happens when I act differently. And that may produce this this cognitive change for me as I start to gain new awareness. I might also look at a positive data log where I'm going to look at all of the things that may be supportive of a new belief about myself. So let's say I always think of myself as unworthy of love. If I was worthy of love, what data is there to support that in that positive way? And positive is I don't love the word positive in the strategy, but what's the thing that might support an alternative view of myself? On a continuum strategy, oftentimes I always think of this in terms of black and white thinking. I'm either lovable or not lovable. I'm worthy or not worthy. I am good or bad. You get the idea, right? On a continuum strategy, instead of me putting myself in a box at one end of the continuum or the other, I think of this on a continuum. Right? I think of like, well, what are all the things that indicate that I am or am not, and where do I put them on the continuum, right? So maybe it is that, I'm dealing with the belief that I'm not smart. And I go, all right, well, as a therapist, I might say to you, what kind of grades did you get? And you're like, I don't know. I did this with a client once. Like, I don't know. I got some C's, a few B's sprinkled in, and then there were these classes that I just like really didn't give a shit about, and like I got a D or an F maybe in them. I'm like, all right, well, like let's look at all of those things on a continuum. 70% of these are on the like, I did really well, or I did well, or I did good. There's like 10% on the not so good. And then we can explain some of those by motivation. Well, all right, that's different. If I look at it a continuum versus I failed or didn't I failed or succeeded. Historical test of schemas looks at how these schemas have developed in the evidence for and against them over the course of your lifespan. So I might say to you, let's start, like, what's the earliest thing you remember? I don't know, 4th, 5th grade. Okay, let's start there. In the things you remember in 4th and 5th grade, what things are in support of or in opposition to the schema that you've developed? Then let's look at it in, I don't know, 6th, 7th grade, 8th, 9th grade, 10th grade, 20s, 30s, depending on obviously how old I'm working with a particular client. But I'm going to look over the course of the history of your life to look at whether or not these schemas have evidence to support them or to refute them, and to probably, in a lot of instances, come to a more balanced sense of who you are and what you are. I think of emotional and imagery restructuring kind of in the same ballpark, and these have to do more with actually traditional like Gestalt, experiential therapies, probably including the dynamic in here. But the idea here is that I want you to experience something new. In one instance, that's number 5 there, the experiential. And then the 6th is like, I want you to reimagine the things that you've been through and to reprocess them in a different way. As I've said and will say a number of times over the course of our semester, oftentimes our earliest experiences, our most emotional experiences, are processed not necessarily in a linear cognitive faction or way, but we experience them as like these kind of emotional, experiential kind of experiences. And the idea with imagery restructuring is that we reimagine them. We put ourselves back into the situation, and in doing so, we come to a new way of understanding them based on our experiential. I keep wanting to say experiential experience, our experience of them now with a different mindset from when we first experienced them. And then as a final reminder, I will say to you again, there's lots of clinical examples. There's transcripts here. There's like how-to information here that I'll remind you over and over again over the course of the semester. That I pick these articles intentionally so that you have these things to go back to when you're doing your clinical work to go, wait, how do I do that imaginal restructuring again? And you go, okay, I'm going to pull up this article. I'm going to read through that again. I'm going to use the suggestions that they have there. I'm going to look at the references and I'm going to follow those to kind of get me additional information and additional things that I can use clinically. So I'm going to keep reminding you over the course of the semester that you have those things. Save them. Make sure that you have them to reference when you start doing your clinical work next year.